Are new cars actually getting worse? Andre, that's what we're talking about today.
That's an interesting topic because isn't progress about getting better, right? But I've heard this from many folks, and I want to see if you guys agree. The good old days were better than now.
Well, let's talk about some examples. So there is a general sentiment I'm seeing online within the car community that things like automatic emergency braking and lane keep assist and turbocharging and these huge tablet screens and the lack of buttons are actually making new cars worse than the old cars. For one reason or another, things may be getting flashier and more expensive, but not actually better. So Andre, in today's podcast, we're going to talk to a few industry experts, folks that have driven just about every new car, folks that have lived, breathed, and experienced this industry more than just about anyone else to get some opinions. But let me start with you, Andre.
Yeah, what's up?
Let's talk about some trends, and I want to get your opinion. Are you pro or con big tablet screens in cars? These stuck-on enormous screens that we see like in this new Ford Mustang.
Okay, well, you pulled up a Ford Mustang GT, I think, right?
Sure.
I am for it.
You like the tablet screens?
My previous life, I was a software developer, right? And I kind of love. That's why I'm buying the latest phone. I like new technology. I like to see where the world is moving to. So maybe I'm in the minority here, but I kind of like screens. I also like that you can customize the way they look, right? For example, in the Mustang, sometimes you can bring like a classic gauge orientation from the 80s or even the 60s. So I'm kind of a fan. Also, I love seeing my modes and like little avatar of the vehicle, and I love seeing like little details. Is it just me?
Well, I do like some of that customizability. I think that's cool. My problem is, as these screens get bigger, I find them to be a little distracting. And I also find that they don't typically integrate well into a lot of these dashboards. It feels like so much design now is like, how big of a plasma screen can I put in the dash? Not about how can we integrate these different materials and features into the dash.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a lot of these screens are replacing hard buttons for the climate control, maybe for the volume, maybe for the tune. What do you think of that trend? Do you
and
miss
maybe
hard
for
buttons?
the headlamps?
Yeah, that's a good one, Andre. That's one we should talk about. Headlamps now, a lot of controls are going digital.
Yeah, and I hate that.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. I own a Chevy Colorado pickup truck, and they switched to where the headlamp control is now a digital button inside the screen.
Hey, podcast listeners and TFL Talk viewers. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about a quick and simple way to sell your car or truck with the help of our new partner, HighRoad. With HighRoad's online portal, you enter your vehicle's VIN number or plate, mileage, and zip code, and you'll get competing offers from several qualified dealers in your area within seconds. You pick the best deal offered and follow through with the dealer to sell your car. No more managing scammy emails from buyers on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. No more time wasted on no-show buyers. No bait and switch with a "will you take a check" excuse from sketchy buyers. Now keep in mind, these offers will be for trade-in values of your vehicle. If you want to go through the hassle of getting more for your car, that's up to you. But if you want to sell your car hassle-free and fast, go to tflcar.com and click Sell Your Car in the navigation menu. Or click on the HighRoad ad at the bottom of the website if you're on mobile, or click on the column if you're on a desktop. HighRoad makes it easy, and we like easy.
So I think for a truck is really not a good thing because I can give you many examples. For example, camping. You arrive at the campsite a little bit later, maybe it's getting a little bit darker, and now you want to reach into your truck and just put on the just to run amber lights, right, to illuminate the space around you. Well, now you have to push the start button. You don't have to start the engine necessarily,
Sure,
but you need the screen to come on. When the screen comes on, now you can switch from the automatic mode to another mode. It's like 3 different steps. Why can't they just reach in and just flip a little switch for headlamps?
Great point. Yeah, and I think that's a really good example of perhaps there's a little bit of cost savings with getting rid of that button. perhaps maybe it's not being passed on to the consumer because cars are getting more and more expensive.
Yeah.
And then even though it's kind of a flashy, interesting feature, it's actually making the experience worse. I'm on the exact same page. Anytime I have to take my eyes off the road, my hands off the controls for more than a split second to activate a key crucial safety feature in a car, it's a problem for me, right? We're also seeing this trend now in shifters. So a lot of shifters used to be a lever, sometimes on the consoles, sometimes on the column, right? To engage gears. Now we're seeing in like Tesla products, a digital shifter or a series of push buttons.
Or a little dial.
Yeah. You like those? You think those are better?
No, I don't like those.
Okay.
I'm coming from the from the background where the shifters were on the column, like chunky, and actually were mechanical, and they went kadunk, kadunk, kadunk.
Okay. Kadunk.
So that's where I'm coming from. So in order for me to take my eyes off the road, maybe to downshift, or going down a mountain highway, I don't like that very much. Yeah.
No, I'm on the same page with you, Andre. I do like the little column shifters that, like GM uses them. They're kind of making the return. Those aren't very distracting to me, and they're easy to use. But anything with buttons, I mean, Edsel tried it in the 50s, and it didn't work then, and I still think it doesn't work now. But Andre, what we're going to do now is we're going to cut to the conversation I had with Alex Dykes from Auto Buyer's Guide. He's been doing this for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Sofyan Bey, driven just about every new car, both really respected automotive journalists.
And our friends, too.
Yeah, good friends of mine. So we're going to have a great conversation and talk about what new car features we think are improving the automobile and maybe some that are detracting from the overall driving experience. Hey everybody, so you joined me today in the rear seat, feeling like a little kid, with Alex Dykes from Auto Buyer's Guide and Sofyan Bey from Redline Reviews, and these are some of the leading guys in the industry.
Ooh.
And they're also...
Where are we leading?
Leading us back to the hotel.
We're leading the carnival.
That's right, so we're in the new Kia Carnival, and we've got some fantastic reviews over at all the YouTube channels. But guys, because all we do is drive new cars, and there's been so much rhetoric online lately saying new cars are terrible and they're crap and they've got too much tech, I thought it would be interesting to get your take on some of the trends in the new car industry and get some more perspectives on what we think. So the first trend which I wanted to bring up is digital everything. Climate controls, audio controls. I'm just going to give you the mic, Sofyan, and you two hash it out. What do we think?
Define digital. Are we talking no buttons? Like I don't get any of these buttons here?
So we're talking about, like, in a lot of vehicles, you've got a screen to change temperature.
Oh, okay.
In some cases, like a slider on a screen in a 94, maybe to change audio.
Okay.
So what do we think of the loss of buttons and knobs?
Loss of buttons and knobs.
Yeah, so I think that an interior for a car should have some buttons and knobs. You can't go everything to screens. I understand why they want to do it, to cut costs and make it feel more modern, but I absolutely hate it when I have to go to turn on my heated seat, for example. I have to tap a button, another button, go into another submenu to do it. I just want to be able to access it all the time with one button. I also really hate the ones that have the digital climate control vents, where you have to adjust the vent
I hate
airflow
the finger on a screen for my air vent. Just give me this knob thing.
Right, like this is just more traditional. I appreciate the fact that Hyundai and Kia still do traditional knobs and buttons in addition to the screens, because I think there is space for both.
Yeah, they just seem like it seems like the answer to a question nobody asked.
So the question is then, guys, why go away from buttons and knobs?
The logic that has been given to me by some car companies is cost, and some of that I buy, and some of it I just do not buy. Like the vent thing, that cannot be cheaper than this.
Yeah, I think it, like Alex said, it's cost, but I also think they just have this like quest to be more modern. They want it to be like less knobs, less buttons. Like, I mean, I think Tesla started it first, obviously, with like the Model S, for example, or the Model 3. So I think every brand just wants to go in that direction because it's a trend, like you said.
Yeah, Tesla is definitely chasing modernity for modernity's sake in a lot of areas with the air vent thing. But the reason I think that I do accept for them, they claim that there was a savings in wiring harnesses and buttons, etc. So I buy that. Like I can understand that the more that you move to a touch screen that you have anyway, that you could save money. But is it the right way to save money? That's where I'm torn. And I have to admit, I like auto climate control. I am the kind of person that puts my climate control on auto, and I just leave it there.
Yes.
I set my temperature, and I will smack people's hands in the car if they're trying to play with my fan speed. They're like, I'm hot. Well, then turn down the temperature. I'm cold. Turn up the temperature. Why are you playing with the fan?
I agree with you, Alex.
Now, Sophian, you want to demonstrate this carnival because it does something which combines both touch controls as well as knobs. So in this key, you can actually cycle between volume and tune or temperature control. So in theory, this is the best of both worlds. So do we like the solution?
Burn it with fire.
I feel like if you're an owner, you're going to get used to that, but there are definitely times where it's an audio right now, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to change the temperature speed. Oh, I just turned the music up really loud.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to hit that button over there. So that's kind of another step that you have to get used to, but I imagine if you're an owner, you probably will.
And see, here's where I would differ a little bit, because I would normally say that about a lot of things in a car, but we owned a Kia EV6 for a full calendar year, and I never got used to it. Every single time I wanted to adjust my temperature or change the volume, it was invariably on the wrong mode. It's like it didn't matter what I had done, it was never right.
Right.
And that was super annoying. And so that meant that all that I got used to after a solid 6 months, what I got used to doing was just having to look at it first instead of just grabbing for it. And that's one of the things I love about the physical knobs is it takes less eye time off the road. So you can just reach over, big volume knob, grab the volume knob, change the volume, temperature knob, do that. So, and this is something I had not considered that I didn't like, but we've had 2 Durangos, we've double Durangoed in our 10 years, right? And so we had the first one that I forgot for a hot second actually did have the climate control for the seats on the screen. So you had to, if you wanted the ventilated seat, you had to touch that on the screen. And one of the interesting changes Dodge did, which goes counter to this, is they actually brought back some physical buttons for the refresh of the Durango. And I do find that easier, because now in Uconnect 5, you can actually control the seats on the screen and the climate control completely on the screen, or with the physical knobs below. And I find myself always reaching for the ventilated seats and using them more than I did before.
Right.
Because it was just easier to get to. And sometimes in the past, it was like, digging through that thing, I don't want to do it. I'll just have my butt be hot.
So, moving away from the knob thing, I think we are 3 thumbs down on the lack of knobs. Are we in agreement on that?
Yes. Yeah.
So the next trend I want to talk about is turbocharging. So back in the 1980s, when Alex was in college,
80s, a little aggressive there. I remember the 80s very well, but I wasn't in college. Thank you.
Turbocharging was like the really hot thing, right?
Yes.
And it was used in a lot of cases for performance.
You could get a turbocharged minivan in the 80s.
Heck yeah, just like this Kia Carnival Hybrid. But now it is the go-to standard for everything, especially the venerable 2 liters in displacement and turbocharging. What do we think? Because those engines have largely replaced like the naturally aspirated V6 in a lot of applications. Is this a positive trend, and why is this happening?
I do love a turbo, I have to admit.
Yeah, I think it depends on the application, right? Because there are certain cars, sports cars, for example, where like a bellowing, wailing, naturally aspirated engine, like a flat 6 in a Porsche, is fantastic, or a high revving V8, for example. I think in that application, it can feel a little bit like a downgrade. Now, today's modern turbos, they do rev a lot higher. They produce much more linear power bands. Like, for example, Lamborghini just did the Temerario, and that has like 10,000 RPM rev limiter, and it's a turbocharged V8, but of course it's a Lamborghini. So I'm okay with the turbo thing because what it does is it creates more, meatier power bands, so you don't have to push the engines as hard, but it really just depends on what kind of vehicle it's in.
And I would say it also depends on who's doing the turbo, because that's a big thing for me. BMW's turbos, pretty darn fantastic.
Absolutely.
I think universally. Mercedes turbos, also pretty snazzy. When we start getting to some of the American turbos, that's where I think there's a bit more variance. Like, I do like Ford's twin turbo 6s.
Yes.
I think those are really good.
We just drove the Buick Enclave. We did not like that engine.
Buick Enclave, a little on the slow side, I have to admit.
Well, that 2.4 turbo was very coarse.
The coarse. I think they could have fixed it with more sound deadening, because when you're under the hood and you're revving it, like, the engine feels smooth.
Right.
It just doesn't sound smooth.
No, it sounds horrible for $60,000.
Yeah, there should have been some sound tuning on that one.
Yep.
Toyota's 2.4 liter turbo sounds like a bucket of bolts in a cement mixer to me. It's not exactly smooth either, especially and I think it's not a problem in the Toyotas, but in the Lexuses,
Yeah.
I want buttery smooth power, and
Which
that's what
that
we used to
V6
have.
was fantastic for.
Right, and now we just don't do that
Yeah.
that same way anymore. I think Jeep is okay with the 2 liter turbo. It's kind of in between.
The Wrangler doesn't sound good. I
It
don't
doesn't
like
sound as good as the V6,
Right.
but I think it's okay. I think it's okay
Yeah.
kind of thing. Volvo's turbos not as powerful as BMWs or the other Europeans, but I think it's a solid
Right.
option. They've smoothed it out. It was not quiet in the early years, but I live in a hilly area, and I know Tommy, you live, of course, up at 5,000 feet, so that's where maybe that's why I like them more.
Right.
Maybe.
So, one thing that I've always thought is, especially in so many of these SUVs where the turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder is not that big of a part of the driving experience. What I mean is, you're not buying that vehicle to experience the engine, right? You're buying it for design or for technology, for whatever.
Right.
Why do you think it is that every manufacturer needs to spend the whatever it is 9 figures to develop their own 2-liter 4-cylinder and 3-liter inline 6, instead of doing what companies like Land Rover are doing, where they just buy an engine from BMW? Is there a need to have 6 versions of the same 3-liter inline 6, it feels like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we have seen global engine alliances in the past,
Oh yeah.
and some of them have fallen apart. I mean, interestingly, Hyundai actually was a member
The
of
Theta
that
engine.
Yeah,
back in the
Hyundai
day.
actually has developed very few engines in their lifetime.
Right.
The current lineup of engines is basically the first engine lineup that Hyundai has ever completely developed in-house.
Yep.
A lot of the ones in the mid 2000s and 90s, et cetera, that was the Global Engine Alliance
Right.
with Chrysler, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
which I think worked well as far as saving money, but it didn't create any inspiring engines.
Right, and I think that's what's important. Is even though, like you said, Tommy, it would be cost effective to do it that way. I think it also takes away the distinction. Like all the cars will just basically sound and feel the same. Versus you have some companies that do better versions of a 2-liter or a 3-liter engine, and I think for enthusiasts, people remember that. For the regular consumer, probably not.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on that one. I think it would make a lot of sense for there to be an American line of engines, and the big three just get together in a room and just work some engines out. I would be okay with that, but I think that none of the big three would be okay with that.
So, last question on the turbo lineup is, we get this comment a lot that the new Turbo 4s are not going to be as reliable as the NAV6s they're replacing, especially like in the Toyota. How do you guys feel about that statement?
I would say we don't have any evidence of that. In Europe, where we've seen small turbos for a lot longer in a sustained fashion than North America, we don't see that problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to say because, again, all these engines are fairly new, so only time will tell. I mean, we do have, for example, Toyota telling us, we're Toyota, if we're going to put out an engine, we're going to make sure that we durability test it to its death, basically, to make sure it can run as long as our naturally aspirated engines. So it's really hard to predict and say. I mean, obviously, you can kind of go by the brand. We expect Toyota and Honda to be more reliable than, like, a Chrysler or a BMW, for example, but you really have to just wait and see.
Yeah, and with engine longevity, it's such a tricky thing because, I mean, as we've seen with Toyota, they recalled every 3.5 liter turbo V6 that they've ever built. So every manufacturer can have a bit of a stumble, but even though people will cite that, that's not an indication of long-term reliability. That was a manufacturing error that could have happened to a non-turbo engine. It didn't require the turbo part. And modern turbos and modern materials engineering is just simply better than it was in the 80s. So we just don't see those same sorts of issues with better cooling of the turbo bearings, water cooling jackets, better cooling of the oil system in the turbo. And to Toyota's point with the 2.4, that is a really under-stressed 4-cylinder turbo. I mean, it's not making a lot of power, let's be honest, compared to other manufacturers' much smaller turbos. Especially in Europe, I mean, you get 1.5 liter turbos making more power than that.
Yeah, that's true. All right, moving on. So, next trend that we're seeing a ton of lately, and this is not a recent thing, but it last few years, is the loss of the traditional coupe and the rise of the crossover coupe, the Sportback, the X6 of the world. How do we feel about those?
I used to hate them.
You used to hate them.
I agree with Alex. I used to absolutely hate them, but now we see so many of the squared off SUV body styles that the coupe body styles just are different. They're not the same vehicle that your neighbor drives if you want to be different. And I also have to say, like, I had like an X5 and an X6, not back to back per se, but like I had 1 week with one car, the other week with the other car. And I really actually preferred the X6 when I spent some more time with it, especially after having spent time with the X5 beforehand.
Yeah, and I will say that the reason I used to hate them, and I'm okay with them now, is because my decision and thought process around their purpose in the world has changed a little bit. Mm-hmm. And now I've come to think of them maybe as the modern sedan. Because when you look at an X6 or a G80 versus a GV80 coupe and you like squint a little bit, they basically have the same profile. Basically all we have now is a high-riding sedan with a liftback in the rear, a sportback kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, if you just decided you don't want an E-Class and you want a GLE coupe thing, because, I don't know, whatever reasons, then sure, yeah, go have that.
Yeah. And also to come back to your other question, Tommy, about the two-doors, the actual two-doors, because those died years ago. I do miss actual two-doors. Like, I remember when I was a kid in high school growing up, I remember when the 2003 Hyundai Tiburon came out, the redesigned one. That was one of my favorite cars.
Really?
Seriously, back when I was like a freshman in high school, and that car came out in 03, 04.
So were you also an original Genesis coupe fan?
I actually was too, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that one. I didn't like the Tiburon.
I liked the Tiburon because it looked really good on the outside. I didn't like the first gen, but that second gen, I thought looked great. You could get it with a V6 and a manual, and it was front-wheel drive. And it was like $18,000 back in the day. I
was always offended by that a little bit. I'm like, hang on, we have the also ran company, which Hyundai was at the time, and they'll admit that too, trying to replicate the sports car from the also ran Japanese company that failed, Mitsubishi. So like we have Hyundai copying Mitsubishi, and you're like, what? Yep. Who needs a slightly better looking Eclipse? Nobody.
Right. Yeah. So I do hope one day coupes will make a comeback. I don't really think that's going to happen now with everybody like obsessed with SUVs, but it is something that is a body style that I will miss.
Yeah. I am encouraged by the astronomically huge coupe that is coming from Dodge, though.
The Charger.
Oh my God, that's big. 206 inches long in a two-door. Wow. I'm sure it's not going to be great to drive compared to like any other two-door, but I'm also strangely intrigued because that's like 1960s resurrected.
Right.
All right, next question. And I think I know the answer to this one. What about the shift to subscription everything?
I am torn on this too.
You're torn. It seems
I am
like
torn.
a pretty
I am torn.
dry answer, Alex. Really?
No, I'm torn.
So I know, like, I remember when BMW was talking about doing a subscription for like heated seats or Apple CarPlay, they quickly dropped that.
Yeah.
I am kind of okay with the self-driving stuff or the hands-free driving stuff. Like, say, for example, Super Cruise, you have to buy it, or Blue Cruise, for example, you buy it for either 90 days or for 3 years, for example, and the cost is significantly less. Because I like how the manufacturer can give you the option to just pay for it for a month if you're going to go on that long road trip, as opposed to paying $4,000 for it for 3 years. So I think that could be savings down the road, because I don't think people necessarily are going to use it every day. Most of the times you're only really going to use it on freeways like what we're on right now. I just don't think people are quite ready to trust these systems in city driving. Because even though like they can offer the capability of hands-free driving, you're still ultimately dealing with people on the road, and when you have more people, more problems, there's going to be room for error.
Yeah, I would agree. And I am of the controversial opinion that I was never offended by BMW's subscription heated seat suggestion, which never happened in the US, by the way.
Thank God.
Never happened here. But actually, I was thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of okay with that, because if you buy the car in Florida and you're like, I don't need heated seats, but it's on the car and you could get them later. What if you get transferred, your job gets transferred to Boston, and all of a sudden you're like, God, I really wish I had those heated seats. Right. You could then turn them on, whereas you couldn't if they didn't exist in the first place.
You'd have to trade the car.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit torn on that, because I do see a world where that functionality, not necessarily to subscribe to heated seats, but to be able to turn them on later, I'm kind of okay with that.
Are you like, can you see that so good? Are you saying like you want the ability to pay $2.50 to turn them on for this drive? You'd be like per drive you want to be able to
No,
charge it?
I would be okay with maybe like with just turning the feature on, period. Like, okay, I bought the car, I didn't have the heated seats enabled at the start, but now I have changed jobs. I'm living in the Northeast. I want heated seats. I'm willing to pay whatever that option would have cost, $200 to turn on my heated seats and have that just work.
I could see that as a fair argument, but it really is going to come down to what is the cost.
Yes, and that's what we don't understand because nobody's really tried it. The closest we've gotten is, and this is the one area where, again, I do think this is a good thing, is unlocking EV performance. We do see manufacturers doing this, and customers seemingly not offended by that.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a cool party trick. It's just like, oh yeah, my car was 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, but I just paid $1,000. Now it's 3.9 seconds. So
and I think some customers, maybe this is why, let me know if you agree with this. Like, obviously, you add more power, you're going to wear out your components faster, right? So your motors, your bearings, whatever, they're not going to last as long because you're now going 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And so there's some of this is paying for that wear and tear. Some of it's paying for the software changes, the warranty service, etc. And maybe that's why EV shoppers seem okay with that. Does that work for you in your brain?
You
Do
know,
you think that's okay?
I don't think it does, because for me, I'm very hardware driven, and I feel like if I'm paying for the ability for a vehicle to do something, I've already paid that money, and I'd be upset that it's not doing that out of the. You know, I kind of understand it with like OnStar, right, where it's primarily a software value add, but especially like if it's a hardware or functionality feature like remote start. You know, Toyota's going to charge for remote start. Right. I think that should be included.
But the remote start for Toyota that they're charging for is only the app remote start.
Not the key? The key
not
will
the
always
key
work?
remote start.
Okay.
Key will always work. It's remote start via the app, but not every vehicle will have remote start via the key. Only available via the app. And that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, that's okay, because you have a cell modem on board. It's going to cost money for the cell connection to exist.
Okay.
So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, maybe I understand that, but even like with the EV power thing, I feel like it's acceptable because we view EVs largely in the same realm as like as a phone or an electronic component, right? But imagine if you had a Challenger Hellcat and had 650 horsepower, and then you had to pay to unlock the extra 50. Although we're kind of seeing that with
we do that, yeah.
with the Ranger Raptor,
yeah.
so that kind of already exists, just not
and
in
for
a
the same
subscription.
reason, seemingly, where it's like, you know, it puts extra wear and tear on the vehicle, extra stress on the components, so greater warranty claims, etc. And so you have to monetize that. So, you know, again, I'm okay with the single pay on those, and the subscriptions for things like remote start via the app, remote lock and unlock via the app. Those kinds of things I'm okay with, I think, on the subscription. Like every month you have to pay, because you have to be able to communicate with the car.
Sure, right. But I think especially if it's a hardware feature like heated seats, that one I struggle with a lot more. So on that basis, and this is kind of a broad question in general, do we feel like there is too much technology in modern cars?
Never.
I mean, you and I all three of us are very used to modern technology, but I imagine if you take somebody who's been driving the same car for 15 years into like this 2025, they're going to be overwhelmed. I think it really depends on the person. I personally don't think that there's too much technology. I think the industry's moving forward. The cars are becoming computers, and there's going to be a learning curve. But I think if you're constantly upgrading your car every 2 to 3 years, you're expecting those features.
Yeah, and I want to pick this apart. So when you say too much technology, this means different things to different people. So what, you might not like the way a feature works in here, because like that screen, we already talked about it, burn it with fire. But what function that is there would I be willing to get rid of? Nothing. I don't want any of those features removed. I just want them more logically laid out.
Right.
But there's no feature in this minivan that I would say, no, I don't want that.
Well, can you see this really quick, Sophia? Thank you. Let's break that apart a little bit. So let's talk about ADAS functionality, lane centering, automatic braking, blind spot monitoring, cross traffic detection, and a lot of these features look like in the near future they may become standard or mandated.
Yeah.
That kind of technology. Let's start with ADAS function. Are we okay with that being a mandatory thing where all new cars need automatic emergency braking or stuff like that?
Bring it on, all of it.
I agree 100% because people are so distracted on their phones. They're not paying attention. They're crashing into things, and that technology can help to prevent accidents. So yes.
Right. And that's the reality is that cars have never been safer. Cars are continuing to be safer intrinsically all along. And one of the areas where we have seen increased deaths is pedestrian deaths, because cars have become bigger, they've become blunter, they're more truck-shaped and more truck-sized, and traffic
heavy.
deaths with pedestrians have increased, even though your likelihood of dying in the car is dramatically lower than it has ever been in the history of humanity. And that's thanks to the ADAS systems. And we are seeing a reduction in pedestrian deaths in vehicles that have those systems on board. So that is one way that we as a society, especially American society, can continue to have big vehicles around and, you know, not kill quite as many school children, because that's bad. No one wants to kill little
I
Timmy
shouldn't be
on the way
laughing,
to.
but I'm like,
No one wants to kill little Timmy on the way to school.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean that's bad.
or think about the parents that
yeah.
have like run over their kids because
Right.
they didn't have the rear cross traffic braking or all those backup cameras and sensors. Like, I would feel horrible.
That's
Like-
just none of that is good.
Right.
And if it costs society a little bit more, makes cars a little bit more expensive, I am personally okay with that, because what's the value of one life? For me, I would be willing to have these limitations for very low human saving numbers, because lives are important. So
Right.
I wouldn't want to say anybody's child is so unimportant that I'm willing to sacrifice one child's life so that someone can get a car without pedestrian detection.
Right.
But don't you think it's kind of a sliding scale? Because where I'm at with this topic is I'm totally fine with a mandated emergency braking system or rear cross traffic alert. I think that's awesome. Or even blind spot monitoring. But then there's certain features like the speed warning alert, where if you go over the speed limit, it automatically beeps. And you know, apparently it was struck down. I learned this last night, but there
Yep.
was
But
California.
Europe, it is very much on.
So where do you draw that line, Alex, where like this might save lives, but it's such an irritating driving experience? Is it worth it? That's a
Yeah.
terrible thing to say, but
And
you
this
know,
is the question we're wondering, because we don't know the answer to this in Europe yet. Like, do people speed less in Europe? I don't know. Or do they just ignore it?
I think people are going to speed wherever you are.
Speeders going to speed.
Like, speeders. Like, speed limits can be just suggestions for most people. Let's be honest there.
Speeders going to speed.
So I
That
personally
sounded wrong. Sorry. Let's blank that out. Speeders going to hate. Speeders going to speed.
No, I personally agree with you on that, Tommy. I hate those speed limit warning things, especially if they beep. I can ignore like a flashing something in the instrument panel. I can ignore that. I think there are BMWs that do that.
How long do you want this podcast episode to be, not to interrupt?
keep going.
Keep going. Okay, so we just drive around randomly, because we're only 7 minutes out.
Yeah, if you guys
We're in a good. rush,
just keep going. Yeah.
Woo!
But yeah, I think that once they start beeping and furiously and they're just kind of irritating the driver, that's where I would draw the line there. It's like, yeah, obviously we want people to not speed as much, but people are going to speed, unfortunately.
Yeah,
just
that's
the
my
way it
question.
is.
So if it's not going to actually change the behavior, then no thanks.
Right.
So the speed limit beeping thing, great that Europe has tried it. We can use them as the natural experiment. Does this thing work? I'm going to go with no. But if it worked, maybe I would be more interested in it.
Okay.
I'm going to go with it's probably not going to work, though.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think like another one that's like that for me is lane keep assist, where I really, and Alex and I are going to disagree, I really appreciate a good lane centering system on a freeway.
On a freeway, it's okay.
Where,
yeah.
you know, you just kind of turn your brain off, you're paying attention, but you're not actively steering. Lane keeping assist, though, where you're on a back road and it's trying to ping pong you back
it.
into the lane, that's one
Hate
I'm not
it.
as on board with. Yeah.
Especially since I drive on a lot of winding mountain roads, so you know you're gonna cut the corners because you know you can, and it's better. So that's my thought on that one. What do you feel about one pedal drive? Because this, I have a twist on this one. So what? Yes or no on the one pedal drive?
So I think that not all one pedal drives are behave the same. There are some that actually bring you down to a full stop, which I appreciate, and their calibration of it is also really well done. And then there are others that are absolute trash.
I would say for the purposes of this, take you to a complete stop. Like
I agree.
any of what do you think about the ones that take you to a complete stop? Are you pro, con?
I like it to take me to a full stop, especially when you're in stop and go traffic, which let's be honest, here in San Diego, you're going to experience that all the time. It's just a nice convenience feature that really people get used to quickly. What I don't like is how brands are really inconsistent across the board.
People definitely get used to them.
Right.
Now, here's my question. If you have a EV with the option, like a Lightning or a Mach-E, where you can turn it on or off, do you turn it on and leave it on? Or do you turn it on and off, and depending on the situation?
Most of the times I leave it on until I have my husband next to me in the car and he hates one pedal drive.
Okay, what about you, Tommy? Are you team one pedal, not team one pedal?
So I think I know where Alex is going with this, because the Germans love this argument. The Germans, for a while, I think were really resistant to it, because on the highway, they can be a lot less efficient
Yes.
than one pedal. However, I don't care. I'm still team one pedal. I think that it's a more pleasant experience. But Sophion brings up a great point. If you've ever driven with someone that's not confident with it, or someone like my mom who just like, she's been driving it for 3 months and it's still like a carnival ride, maybe you're right, Alex.
I have never been in a car with one pedal drive with someone else driving where I could not tell that had one pedal drive on.
Really?
You can always tell.
Okay.
You can always tell the interactions. But no, that's actually not the point I was intrigued by. It appears that China is going to ban one pedal driving on all new EVs,
Really?
theoretically starting in 2026 because of safety. Because safety research now seems to point to a lack of muscle memory on people that drive in one pedal driving all the time. And they're blaming a lot of unintended acceleration and other issues on the one pedal drive. Because if you're in an emergency situation where you have to brake more aggressively than one pedal drive is capable of doing, then you don't have the muscle memory to remember to put your foot on the right pedal, and sometimes people confuse them. So apparently China is considering discontinuing the one pedal drive, where it is universally beloved, apparently. Like all the Chinese EV companies do pretty aggressive one pedal driving. Seemingly, it looks like it's going to go into effect. 2026 might be the end.
Okay. That's surprising. So,
and I want to see more research on this. This is something where I would love the IHS or another research company to really dig into that data and ask the question, like, are rear ends and other accidents more likely in this vehicle versus that vehicle with or without one pedal driving? I'm curious.
So, switching it up a little, speaking of electric vehicles, it's pretty much universal that every generation of a new model is bigger and heavier, especially as we see the new EVs come out. Is this a problem, and is there a limit?
I would say it's not inevitable, and Tesla has proved this, because the Model Y is lighter than a BMW X3.
Okay.
It just requires some dedication.
I definitely think that there should be a limit at some point, because you're right, Tommy, things are getting really, really heavy. They're really loaded with technology and stuff, and it's like, you can't, drive. I don't think people should be driving around in cars that are 10,000 pounds. Just think of like the GMC Hummer EV. It's a 9,000 pound beast, and it's like, I feel like that's the kind of car that's going to kill people, or it's going to crush and destroy your driveway, for example, because it's so heavy. So I think at some point there should be a limit. It's just hard to say when and where do we draw that line.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I would agree that there should be. Maybe we haven't thought of this as a society because it just didn't exist before, but I think maybe there should be some rational weight limits around regular passenger vehicles for regular driver's license categories. I'm not clear how we would get there, because we're all three of us are allowed to go out and buy an RV and just drive that big old bus around.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We can buy a school bus. We just can't have school kids in it, but we could drive the school bus with our regular licenses.
We can take the next exit, and we'll finish this chat on the way back. So what are some other trends you think I'm missing that we're seeing a lot of in the new car industry that you're either a really big fan of or you just don't like?
Technology or just any trend?
Just any
I can think of one that Alex
Piano
hates.
black, kill the piano black.
I was going to say black wheels. Alex hates black wheels.
Well, black wheels I can fix myself.
Yes.
I can't fix the massive amounts of piano black on everything. My God, what do they think we're in a piano bar? Why? Whoever asked?
It's not a practical choice. Right?
Yeah, what customer was like, you know what, that interior needs some black bits that scratch super easily. That's what's missing. That's what I want to know.
I would say another trend that I've noticed are those full LED light bars for taillights. What do you guys think of that?
Ooh, I'm okay, I think.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Because I can't even remember which brand started doing it first, but I feel like every brand is now doing the LED light bar.
Off of that, A trend that I just cannot seem to get behind are the illuminated front emblems.
Oh,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
about to go into that too.
Yeah, that doesn't. They're not classy. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit showy.
I feel like Mercedes may have done it first, but you know what's funny about Mercedes? I always knew whenever you saw a Mercedes back in the day that had the illuminated logo, you knew that buyer was cheap because they didn't get the adaptive cruise control option because you couldn't combine
Yeah, you couldn't
the two.
combine them. Yeah, yeah. So want the bling, don't want the feature. You know.
Yeah, I kind of understand. Like, I understand the reasoning for the Audi logo or a Mercedes star, but like the Volkswagen ID4 with the illuminated rear logo, I don't know if I'm into it. I don't know if I like it.
Volkswagen is just as proud as Mercedes. You know, I mean.
Okay, how about our Nissan Leaf has the illuminated front logo?
Oh.
For $9 a
Wow.
month.
Crap.
Yeah.
Nice.
What do we think about Honda? And this is not maybe a new trend. This has been around forever, but Honda rebadging. Maybe rebadging's unfair. Reskinning a GM platform for the Acura and the Honda Prologue. How do we feel about that?
I'm actually totally fine with that because Honda didn't have the money to develop their own EV platform in that time frame. They don't have a North American factory, so it wouldn't have gotten the tax credits. That's an immediate uncompetitive problem. To be honest, the average front-wheel drive GM product does not drive that much differently than the average Honda front-wheel drive product. I'm sorry, people out there, they really don't. And it wouldn't have had Super Cruise on the Acura, which was pretty good if it hadn't been a
Acura
GM
Watch
one.
360 Plus with hands-free.
Extra, yes. Oh my God, that rolled off your tongue like you work for Honda. Just saying. I'm kind of okay with it. I understand what's in it for GM. I don't quite understand as much about what's in it for Honda.
See, I disagree with you, Alex. I think it was a mistake for Honda and Acura to use a GM platform. Now, I understand from a business perspective, it makes total sense. However, I think what Honda may eventually realize is in the long term, it could hurt them because people buy Honda and Acura for reliability and build quality. GM, let's be honest, is not necessarily known for that. And you also get into the interiors of these vehicles, and every one that we've been in, I don't know about you guys, but squeaks and rattles abound. The plastics never fit well. It didn't smell like a typical Honda Acura. It had that GM cheapness for me, which honestly may be something I only notice. And just the buttons and switchgear, none of it felt like it belonged or was part of the Honda Acura family. And I think that's a really big problem for people who are used to, let's say, like their CR-V or their Pilot. They're going to get into this and be like, oh, this is so similar. And then at the same time, you're going to have to deal with people making fun of you.
Right.
Like, imagine buying a ZDX. It's like, oh, nice lyric. Like,
Well,
you're going to hear that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I agree with part of that. I would say that if you're not a Honda fanboy, and you just look at a piece of plastic, honestly, they're both cheap. There's probably no cost difference between GM plastics and switches and Honda plastics and switches. But there is definitely this fanboy side that's like, oh, that's cheap because it's GM.
Right.
You know, we don't really have good reliability or long-term metrics on this, but by the ones that we do have, there does not really appear to be an intrinsic reliability or fit and finish difference as far as like how will that piece of plastic wear the one to the other. But I completely agree that the big problem is, and the danger for Honda is, you don't know that it's a Honda because you didn't do your research.
Right.
You go buy a Prologue because it's a Honda. You like the Honda dealer. You know, and this is the way to buy a GM EV with the best dealer network because Honda dealers are so much nicer. So you go to the nicer Honda dealer, you have a nicer experience, you buy your Prologue, great. Somebody tells you it's a GM.
Right.
You do your research and you're like, oh my God, I got a GM.
Which I can't believe you would not know that.
Some people don't, to be honest. But you know, you live with it for 3 years and you're like, wow,
Right.
this Chevy was really nice.
But
I
what
think
if
I'm
it
going to
was
go
not
buy
right?
another Chevy.
But what if it was not nice? What if it constantly broke down and then the Honda dealer has no idea how to fix it?
We don't, yeah.
And then you're
don't
taking
know.
your Honda to a Chevy dealer to try to fix it because the Honda dealer's like, screw this, I don't know how to fix this.
Yeah, logically, EVs are going to have very few problems.
Right.
I mean, minor software glitches that can happen on everything. But I do wonder, you know, this customer then gets used to Super Cruise in the Acura or the Google connected infotainment system or, you know, whatever specific thing to GM that there is. And, you know, next time around, the Honda doesn't offer those things.
Right.
What's that customer going to do?
Yeah.
Next topic, and this is one that's kind of a hot button issue right now, is performance EVs. So there's a lot of general thought online that if you're a car enthusiast, you should want a gasoline engine, especially in your performance car. Does the Ioniq 5N or the Model 3 Performance or whatever have what it takes to convince you to buy a performance EV?
I think the Ioniq 5N absolutely does, because it's the complete performance package. And finally, the Model 3 Performance, I think, is really close to that ideal. I think Tesla should have actually gone further with that, and they could have. They could have given it a factory body kit modification, really crazy meaty tires, really made it more of a Taycan competitor kind of a thing, because it has the power for that. But I think there's nothing wrong with Taycan, Ioniq 5N, the other, really aggressive performance EVs. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I think that there is room for performance EVs. I mean, I know enthusiasts are petrol heads, they like to call themselves. They are all about the internal combustion and manual shifting, but at the same time, we live in a world like this area here where it's just constant traffic, and you don't want to be having to shift gears all the time, or even some people I feel like a lot of normal people get into an EV and they live with it. They don't want to have to go to a gas station anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that it's great that brands are offering a performance perspective, especially like Hyundai with the Ioniq 5N, the sounds, the fake sounds that it makes. People like to make fun of it, but I think it's absolutely brilliant because it works so well. It feels real.
And some people just really love that video game aspect.
Exactly. Like I remember I did a comparison video with Rob's Model 3 Performance. My editor, Rob, he bought one, the new one, and an Ioniq 5N. He had never driven the Ioniq 5N, and we put him on camera. He drove it, and I literally just had him drive it for the first time. And when it shifted, he was giggling like a little girl. He was like, "Oh my God, it actually shifted!" And it was a genuine first-time reaction from a guy who is used to driving manual, high-revving Hondas all the time.
And I would say a lot of this is the same discussion that we used to have when there were turbocharged performance cars. Oh, performance cars should never have a turbo. They could never be complete with anything other than a big naturally aspirated V8. People disliked superchargers. They disliked dual clutch automatics. They disliked automatic transmissions. And now you have, Corvettes with DCTs and turbos and electrified Corvettes. And I think it's that same just resistance to change.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Well, folks, we got 6 more minutes. Are there any other trends you guys are really passionate about?
Passionate
Piano
about.
black was a good one.
Piano black, yeah, dreadful.
That's really
let's
dumb.
see. I don't know.
Phone is key. We like phone is key.
I'm mixed on phone is key. If it works, it's great. If it's bad phone is key, no thanks. I do not understand the shift to these kinds of rotary style shifters here. Why change the thing that's worked if it's not going to do anything for you? Like the whole Hyundai thing and Kia thing, actually putting it on the column, I'm actually okay with that because it gives you the space back.
Right.
But if it doesn't give you any extra space, why change it?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like, if you're going to take it away here, give us some actual interior storage space and such. But yeah, I mean, I guess the tablet style screens, I know that was kind of big up there.
I'm kind of okay with the tablet.
Yeah, because I mean, when this first came out, people were like, "Oh, it looks like somebody stuck an iPad." Although there are definitely some that looks
some
like
iPads,
or just think of the Mach-E, for example, where it's a portrait-oriented screen that looks like your phone in landscape or in portrait mode. It's just stuck on the screen.
I'm okay with the portrait ones. I'm like, that's a personal preference. If you love it, love it.
Yeah, I think it's just something that you got to get used to. So I mean, I guess the other one thing that's coming into play now are the big pillar-to-pillar screens. What do you guys feel about that? Like Lincoln just showed that. Cadillac has that with the 55-inch display. I spent a week with the Nautilus last month, and I fell in love with that screen.
I think if you're going to do it, I want that screen to be one actual screen, more along the lines of the Cadillac, where it's a bigger screen rather than the two screens that are very clearly separated. I kind of want them a little bit more harmonious, I guess. Passenger screens seem stupid to me.
It is very pointless.
Yeah.
I think it's very pointless, and it's really just there as a gimmick.
Yeah, and everybody's passenger screen is equally dumb in my book. It doesn't matter which manufacturer it is, BMW, or Porsche, Mercedes,
Jeep,
Chrysler, etc. All stupid. No passengers, unless it does something. Like, I want that passenger screen to CarPlay. I want it to have, full screen satellite imagery mapping or something.
Right.
But what they do, it's just not enough.
Right.
For the cost, especially, too.
Good one. Well, folks, that was a ton of fun. Thank you so much. And Alex, if folks want to find out where you're at, where can they go?
They can go to Auto Buyer's Guide and EV Buyer's Guide on all of your favorite outlets. YouTubes, the Facebooks, etc.
And Sophion?
Yeah, and you guys can basically find us at Redline Reviews, Redline_reviews for some of the TikTok and Instagram stuff, but just the Redline on YouTube.
All right, guys, thank you so much. That was a ton of fun.
See ya.
So, Andre, what are 2 features you think in modern cars that have made the automobile better, and what are 2 features in modern cars that have made them worse?
So I think specifically in cars, and once again, sporty cars. Let's look at those. I think the chassis are improving, right? The overall driving experience, maybe not the steering feel. The steering feel is a weird thing, right? It's usually now electrically boosted, right? So some manufacturers struggle with this, and some are better. But I overall think because the tools that the engineers use are getting better. They're able to design these chassis that are, stiffer in the right places and more compliant in other areas, like the suspension systems. So I'm actually thinking that the cars are getting easier to drive and more fun to drive, in generally speaking.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. What's another feature you think has made new cars better than old cars in recent years?
You know what? I kind of like the trend to going to kind of remote control via app.
Okay, good one.
So
Yeah.
I think Tesla is the best at this still. I mean, because I've used Ford apps, I've used GM apps, I've used some others, but I think Tesla is the best. I kind of like, especially if you're talking about electric vehicles, you can check the charging status, for example, or the battery status very
Good one.
easily.
Yeah.
You can control inside climate control system.
Precondition the cabin,
Precondition the cabin. I think those features, especially in cold winters and really hot summers, I think those features can be very, very nice.
I am going to give you 2 others that I think are really good.
Really?
Automatic emergency braking.
Ooh,
I think that's a
that
great
could
one.
save your butt.
And blind spot monitoring. And both of these are more passive safety features that don't intervene in the day-to-day driving experience unless it really has to. So I think automatic emergency braking is a great feature. People jump in front of you. Maybe you're looking out the window. Maybe you're distracted. Having the car be able to monitor at the last minute and slam on those brakes to either avoid an accident or very much minimize an accident. Great piece of technology. Blind spot monitoring. I'm not talking about like lane keep that's pushing you back in the lane, but just a little light to let you know, hey, there's someone, in the lane next to you when you're trying to merge. Awesome piece of technology. So I think those are 2 things that have made cars a lot safer and have not intruded on me driving an automobile. Now, what are 2 things, Andre, you think in new vehicles that have made cars worse? And they can be things we've talked about. What are some examples?
Well, there's a flip side of the driver assistance tech that's
Okay.
worse.
Yeah.
Or the experience is worse.
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
Where it's annoying, right? We talked about, for example, lane keep systems.
Sure.
They either vibrate your steering wheel or maybe give you a chime or something like that, or a little flashing light. But sometimes when we're driving on highways, sometimes we need to avoid an obstacle, maybe a pothole in the road. Sometimes, you can find a little sportier line on a curvy road. And if the system is always yelling at you and vibrating your steering wheel, that's really annoying and not helpful.
Okay, good
So
one.
I really hate those features. Some manufacturers, they allow you to, disable the system, but often it comes back with a key cycle.
Right.
Right. As soon as you restart the vehicle, you shut it down and turn it back on, all of a sudden that system is back on.
Right. What's another one? Is there another one that you think just drives you crazy?
I think pricing.
Good one. Good one, Andre. Yes.
I
true.
think, like you mentioned, I don't think we're gaining a lot of these efficiencies that manufacturers are finding with production.
It's not being passed to the consumer.
We're not. Maybe it's inflation for the most part, but every car is now getting more expensive. It seems.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We're looking at just outside that door is a base model Wrangler for 41 grand that has manual windows. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So I think my 2 things that I dislike, outside of those we've talked about already, automatic high beams.
Okay.
Very rarely do I find that those actually work better than me just flicking the switch. And it is good that you're less likely to blind someone going the other way with your headlights dipped or bright, it'll do it automatically. So another one is potentially LED headlights are so bright now that, coming on to cars, that's a whole nother topic. So I find that typically those don't do much. And then another feature I really don't like in modern cars. It just comes back down to the knob thing for me. Especially like Volkswagen uses these little slider controls for like volume.
Mm-hmm.
The volume should always be a knob, in my opinion.
Well, because the car is moving, usually you want to control the volume.
And granted, steering wheel, right? Like you can get the buttons.
Okay.
But just being able to like quickly adjust the radio volume.
Some manufacturers used to do this where several knobs of same size were next to each other.
Yes.
And that was confusing too.
Right.
So there's bad ways of doing it and good ways of doing it. And you mentioned LED headlamps. For example, the Cybertruck has LED lamps in the front too, but they don't generate heat usually.
Oh, good point.
And they could be caked with ice or mud, and mostly ice or snow, and your visibility can be much decreased because of that.
Last comment about knobs, and I remember this, and I think you know this better than I do, is back in the previous generation Tundra, when they launched it, they were really proud of the fact that the knobs were so big.
Yes.
Do you remember this?
Yes.
You could use them in gloves.
Yeah.
Which is kind of something you don't usually think about, but that actually was very true. Like they were so huge, you could use them with anything on your hands, which was very underrated. Try doing that in a new car. Good luck.
Exactly. If you want to touch a tiny button or actually a screen in a glove. Gloves are usually for trucky things. Let's say you're at the job site and you're wearing a glove and you're jumping in your truck to, just very quickly. You want to adjust things. But I usually don't wear gloves too often when I drive normally.
So like you hop in a freezing cold car and you got your big winter gloves on before it warms up. Maybe that's something you do.
Yeah.
But anyways, folks, we'd love to hear your opinions on this topic, and we'll go ahead and read your comments in the section below. What do you guys think? Are we pro or con technology? Maybe not technology, but changes in new cars. Obviously they're getting safer and faster, more fuel efficient, and that's great. But some of the changes they're making now are a little bit befuddling.
Yeah, I would love to hear your opinions as well.
So head over to alltfl.com if you want to find more podcasts, more reviews, more written reviews, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And also TFLstuff.com because we have merch.
Yeah, look at that. Car was a hit, Chandra. I love that shirt. That's really cool. TFLstuff.com for all of our merch. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.